Welcome to the Purposeful CEO podcast, the space for passionate, driven leaders who aren't just here to build a business, but to lead a movement. If you're here to make a real impact, to lead with purpose and create a legacy that lasts, then you are in the right place. I'm Emma Campbell, leadership coach, mindset mentor, purpose activator, and mama to two cheeky little munchkins. And for the past 15 years, I've helped small business CEOs scale their team without breaking their culture and unlock their team's full potential. And my mission has always been simple: to help those doing good in the world to do even more good and inspire belief in what's possible for you, because it's all so possible. Let each episode be your reminder to pause from the hustle and come back to you, your why, your purpose, your reason for why you started, to trust that inner knowing and to lead from that place, because when you do, everyone wins. Let's dive in. Oh, hello. I am so excited to bring this episode to you today, and it is all on I guess like an overview and an extension on Mel Robbins' The Let Them Theory. And if you haven't heard of Mel Robbins' new book, and her whole idea on the Let Them Theory, then definitely go and check her out. She's on Instagram, she's everywhere, and she's absolutely amazing. And I love that she has brought to life this topic that, in all honesty, has, and as she talks about in her book, has been around for a really long time, but I feel like she's rebranded it in a really beautiful and simple way. And me personally, as a bit of a recovering control freak, and as I think, most of the world, I guess, has a little bit of a challenge when it comes to learning how to let go of control and, trust more and, know how to manage our energy. I just think it's such an important topic. And I remember the first time that I learned about this topic of the Let Them Theory, which basically is, like, in a nutshell, it's about how to know what to give your focus to. So knowing what you can control in any situation and knowing what you can't control in any situation, and learning how to know the difference between those two things, and then knowing what to focus on at the heart of it. And really, it's a really beautiful energy management tool. It's a great focus tool. It's everything. And I remember the first time that I learned about it. So the first time that I learned about it was introduced to me as something called the circle of influence. You may have heard of that. If you haven't, jump onto Google and you can even search for the word circle of influence, and it gives you a really beautiful, simple, visual overview, which I personally find is really, really helpful. And when I ran a leadership workshop a couple of weeks ago, we actually talked about this exact topic. And there was a particular manager who was speaking about a situation with her team, and some team members that she was a bit concerned about in terms of how they were showing up and how they were getting their roles done. And this particular manager, I could see, was getting quite frustrated and perhaps even a little bit stressed about the situation. And, we can all go there, right? Like me on a daily basis. And I think it's so, so beautiful to remember that we've always got this tool in our pocket of remembering the Let Them Theory, or the circle of influence theory. And so how I explained it to this particular manager was to draw a circle, which is the circle of influence, just draw a circle up on the board, up on the whiteboard. And I drew a little human, a little person, in the middle of a very small circle. And then I drew another circle around that, and then another circle around that. And the idea is that the circle in the middle is where we do a bit of a brainstorm on the things that we can control in any particular situation. And then the next layer of the circle is about the things that we can influence, which is always kind of like that gray territory. And then the things that we can't control are all the things on the outer rim. And we're going to go into some examples on like what all of these different things are. But with this particular manager, it was so helpful for her to be able to come back to, okay, hang on, when it comes to my team and them, not showing up in the way that I need them to in this particular situation, what do I have control over? I don't have control over them and their own actions and what they do and what they say and how they show up. The only thing that I have control over is myself. The only thing that I have control over is what I say, what I do, how I show up, how I bring myself to work, the state that I show up in, how I take care of myself, how I look after myself, the things that I eat, that I don't eat, all of those sort of things. And sometimes it can just be the most beautiful kind of like just easeful process to actually draw it up on a board and really clearly look at, okay, these are the only things that I actually have control over, and that's where my focus needs to go. And if I focus on all the things I can't control, like my team and what they're doing and how they're prioritizing their work and blah, 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 that's when I feel out of control. That's when I feel powerless. That's when I feel helpless. That's when I feel stressed. That's when I feel anxious. And when I feel all of those things, I don't show up very well as a leader anyway. It impacts how I show up, and then I don't do a very good job. So it's like this giant spiral of like negativity, right? And so that's what I want to talk about today, because as we know, when we focus on things that we can't control, it leaves us out of our power. It takes us out of our power and it leaves us feeling powerless. And when we're feeling powerless, when we're feeling out of control, that's when we spiral into stress and anxiety, because we kind of like we've given our focus and our energy away, and it actually impacts how we show up. So this can apply to so many situations. Like probably the biggest one that I feel like people can have the biggest like mindset shift on is when it comes to the good old giving someone feedback or having a difficult conversation, which, for majority of us, like 99% of the time when I run these workshops with leaders and I ask people who gets like a knot in their stomach just at the thought of having a difficult conversation, and like all the hands go up in the room. Like we all feel a bit sick about having to confront someone or like potentially get involved in conflict or give someone feedback. And, too often this will be the question that leaders will ask me is like, okay, Em, so how do I give someone feedback without upsetting them? How do I give my team member feedback without upsetting them? And while I totally get the intention with this question, and the desire like that comes from such like a big, beautiful giving heart to not want to hurt someone's feelings, they're actually asking the wrong question, because it's impossible to control another person's emotions, thoughts, or actions or words. It's impossible to control another person's emotions, thoughts, actions, or words. So when we're asking the question, how do I give someone feedback without upsetting them? We're actually setting ourselves up for fear, anxiety, and failure because we can't control whether they get upset or not. And so the question is like, so what happens when we focus on things outside of our control? It leaves us feeling stressed. It leaves us feeling anxious. And when we feel stressed and anxious, what do we often do? We often end up avoiding the thing that we're supposed to do. We avoid giving the person feedback. We avoid having the conversation that might piss them off or annoy them. And that's not ideal, right? Like we need to have the conversation, and we need to actually have the conversation sooner rather than later, so that like the emotion around it doesn't like build and build and build, and the tension and the resentment doesn't build and build and build. And so the better question here is, How do I give feedback in a way that ultimately boosts performance? How do I give feedback in a way that gets the message across really clearly? Because this question helps us bring our power and our focus back to the things that we can control. Knowing that the things that we control is what we do, what we say, how we prepare for that conversation, maybe the intentions that we set before walking in. We can even control our state, like our physical state up to a point, right? Like, we can take big, deep belly breaths, or we can go for a run, or we can, not overdose on coffee before the conversation. Like, there are certain things that we can do to also like control how we show up in our state before walking into that tricky conversation. What we can't control is them. We can't control their response to what we say. We can't control their emotional reaction, whether they get upset or not. We can't control what they say in response to what we say, and we can't control ultimately even what they do with the feedback that we give them. There's a lot of things that actually aren't within our control. And that's kind of partially terrifying, but also very freeing, right? Because we kind of just have to like drop that thread. We have to like drop the attachment to thinking we can control that stuff. And we just have to bring our focus back to ourselves. Because at the end of the day, here's the thing. Here's the real big juicy pumpkin. Their emotions are not your responsibility. Let that sink in. I'm going to say that again. Their emotions are not your responsibility. Their emotions are theirs to own. They are entitled to any emotions that come up for them. And even if you said all the right things, perfectly nailed the most perfect feedback conversation, the truth of the matter is that they may still get upset. And that's not your fault. Like, that's not on you. Their emotions are theirs to own. And actually, like, they're allowed to have their feelings as well, right? Like, feelings are neither good nor bad. And sometimes we get a bit scared of like the negative emotions, but we're like happy about like the positive emotions. But like, emotions are just emotions. It's just like energy moving through the body. And often we can't control our emotions. They just are. So our job is to allow our team to be able to feel those things. And it doesn't mean that you've got it wrong if they're upset afterwards. Sometimes, feelings are the things that can actually help us grow. So sometimes like feelings, even if they're negative feelings, they can be the actual like the catalysts for growth and change. Feelings and emotions and having an emotional reaction is healthy and natural and normal and not something that we want to avoid. So the question is not, how do we give feedback without upsetting someone? That is not the question. The question is, how can we give feedback in the most clear, intentional, and effective way that helps them really take away some clear drivers for change? And so the let them theory would say, let them have their reaction. And it would say, let me, as the person having the feedback conversation, let me hold firm boundaries around what's expected in their role. Let me support them and be there for them if they do get upset. Let me hold space for them to allow them to feel their feelings if something comes up. But the goal is not to skip the emotional part, because that, those emotions are often our biggest teachers. Emotions are not the enemy. Let me show up in the most kind, compassionate, clear, and intentional way possible for that conversation. Let me, as the person giving the feedback, be as clear as I can about expectations moving forward and how I want to see that person grow and change and improve. Let them have their emotional reaction about it and let them decide how they want to change or not change from there, right? Like energetically, there's like a dynamic piece to this where you're letting go of the rope, like you're letting go of the cord that connects you trying to control them. Like this is about letting go of that attachment piece. And you will notice that as you let go, that you like instantly feel lighter. You instantly feel more energized and you instantly feel more in your power, more in your strength, more in your confidence. The truth is as well that, you know, at the end of the day, if they don't change after you've given them the feedback, if they choose to sulk or if they choose to not change or if they choose to move on or whatever, then ultimately you are letting them show their true colors. And it's giving you more information to then decide what's next for you. The power of this is massive. It's like when I do this for myself, and often I do it with like the biggest one for me that I'm constantly working on is with my kids. I can find like the let them, like letting other people do their thing, can find that relatively okay apart from when it's with like really close family. And so this is the thing that you might notice is that like it's actually easier for you to do this, to apply to let them theory to people that you're not that close with. But the closer that you are with them and the more that their life or their actions impacts you, the harder that this skill can be to practice and to work on. But when you do it, so when you do come back to letting them do the thing that they need to, it's like letting go of all these threads, these energetic threads and emotional threads you didn't even realize you were holding onto constantly and unconsciously that were like consistently sucking your energy dry. When you're like kind of micromanaging, like unconsciously micromanaging outcomes or people. And the amazing thing is that often we try to control other people or things because we think that by worrying about it or giving it energy or trying to control it, we will somehow make the situation better. But the truth is that often it's the opposite. And that often the more that we try and control or worry about something, it actually makes the situation worse and leaves us feeling like crap. And that often when we sit back, when we give another person space to change or to do their thing or to have their emotions or to go through their own process, then that's when they often actually, because they've been given the space, that's often when they actually start taking ownership themselves. When we're breathing over their shoulder, you know, they're often very aware of that and they know that we'll kind of catch them and we'll support them if they don't do the thing that they're supposed to do. And often they won't actually show up and do the thing that they're supposed to do because we're too on top of them. And they know that we're watching and catching any mistakes, that they never fully take ownership. And the big one that I think of it is with my kids and their bloody icy pole wrappers that they leave all over the house. And really, I have warned them that if they leave those icy pole wrappers on the couch or around the house one more time, the whole bag of... Do I let them go through that process of having their icy poles chucked in the bin? No. I bloody pick them up and I put them in the bin. So I'm not a very good role model when it comes to applying the let them theory with kids, but I can give you some really, really good tips when it comes to adults. But stay tuned to that space because I'm working on it. I guess the long and the short of it is that the let them theory is about letting them make their mistakes, giving them the space to learn. You know, if they do make mistakes, it's about letting you have a conversation with them about it and to give them feedback or, let them learn from the situation. Let them have their feelings and reactions about it. Is this making sense? So the let them theory, just to sum up, also known as the circle of control or the circle of influence. Google it, have a look at the picture. I'm going to actually put like a visual on my Instagram so that you can have a look at that as well, because I'm a really big visual learner and I know how powerful this can be. It's about knowing where to put your focus and where to put your energy. And your energy is your most precious, incredible, important resource that you possibly have, right? Your energy is everything. And this is about knowing where to put your energy so that you're not like wasting it on the things that actually aren't helpful, and actually bringing it back to what you can control. And it literally, like, you could apply this to absolutely everything, from like letting your team member feel upset when you give them feedback if they haven't been showing up in the way that you need them to for the business to thrive, to letting your kids have their emotional reaction about having to brush their teeth in the morning or when you have to turn the TV off, to letting people think bad thoughts about you or judge you when you post something that matters to you on social media, to letting your partner feel grumpy when they first wake up in the morning. This is a personal one. I'm personally still working on that one as well. What you can always control in any of these situations is the things that you do. So your actions, your daily habits, the intentions you set, your self-care practices, how you support yourself, the food that you put in your body, the things that you say, the words that you choose. You can also control your view, like your mindset, like how you actually choose to see the situation. Are you choosing to see this as something that is for you and that this is actually a gift for you to learn and grow? Or are you choosing to see this situation as something that is happening to you, which is a little bit more of that victim mindset? So you always have control of your view in any situation, right? And you have control over your state. Like, you're up to a point, you have a certain level of control over your emotions, through how you breathe, how you exercise, how you meditate, how much coffee you drink, all of those sort of things. The harder part is letting go of what's not in control. And it can actually take a real conscious, intentional decision to drop the rope on these things. So what's not in our control is basically everything else. What they do, what they say, how they feel, the story they tell themselves, or the meaning that they make from what you say to them. And it's not your job to control their narrative about the situation. Let me say that again. This is really, really important and really powerful. It's not your job to control their narrative or their story that they tell themselves about the situation. That's something that only they can do, and you can't control that. And just notice, as soon as you let go of all of these things that you can't control, just notice how much lighter you feel. But here's the final thing. Here's the clincher that I think is actually like just as important as this whole let them theory. I believe that the let them theory is amazing, absolutely amazing, and so powerful. And I don't believe that it touches on something that is integrally vital in us being able to actually like apply the let them theory. An absolutely vital ingredient that allows us to actually let go and surrender. Do you know what that ingredient is? It starts with a T and it ends with a rust. Can you tell I'm my mum? You're right. It's trust. So to be able to let go of control, to be able to let them and to truly like let that go, to let them do their thing, I believe that it requires a level of trust. A trust that it will be okay. A trust that things will work out in the end. A trust that you'll be supported if something goes wrong. A trust that you'll be able to handle like whatever happens on the back of this situation. Do you hear what I'm saying here? And where does trust come from? So my belief is that some people are naturally better at trusting and letting go than others. I believe there's a few different factors in here around like definitely like nature and nurture come into this, around like your temperament and your nervous system. And I believe like a lot of it really comes down to our childhood experiences and our childhood conditioning. Because if you think about it, if things have typically worked out well for you in the past, if you've had a generally pretty, positive life where things have kind of worked out and they've gone okay over the course of your lifetime, it's likely that your nervous system and your psychology will kind of like sink into being able to trust and let go a lot more quickly and easily. If you've had a lot of adverse, difficult, challenging childhood or life experiences where things maybe haven't worked out that well, where you've had to really like work really hard to change things, and that you haven't really been able to just like trust that things will work out, and that it's really relied on you having to do everything to make a change, then this whole let them theory might be a little bit trickier. And that's not to say that you can't do it. I believe that like this trust piece and this trust and letting go piece, that it's a muscle that you can work out and you can build. And one tip I'd give you, and I do this for myself, is to open a notes page on your phone and to make an evidence list. And a list of evidence of the times that things have worked out for you. A list of all the evidence when things have gone well, when you have been supported, when good things have happened, when things worked out the way that you wanted them to. You could start one and list evidence, like if you were like walking into a feedback, like giving a team member feedback conversation and really struggling with like letting them, you could start one like listing evidence of times that things have worked out okay in previous similar situations. So like list all the times that things have worked out okay in the end after you've given a team member feedback or after you've had a difficult conversation. Because sometimes our brains need this evidence that things are going to be okay in the end if they've seen that things have worked out well in the past. Because often our brain realizes that like past history is the best predictor of like the future. Maybe in the past when you've given a team member feedback, maybe they've stepped up and that's amazing and awesome, and maybe they've thrived in their role, or maybe like things didn't work out in terms of maybe the team member decided that they wanted to move on, that this wasn't the role for them. And my belief is that both of those situations are evidence that things worked out the way they needed to, right? Because you don't want a team member there who's not the right fit. I hope that this has landed beautifully for you and that this has really helped you know how to apply the let them theory in a really specific way in probably like the hardest possible conversation that you'll have as a leader in giving feedback. And I hope that it can also help cast a light on, why you might be struggling to apply the let them theory if you have been struggling with it, and how you can start to kind of like build that trust muscle up again as well. And one last thing that I'd say is that your individual personality traits, your leadership style has a big impact on this. So if you've ever done the Enneagram quiz, I've got a free link and I'll drop it into the show notes below. It's also on my Instagram. It's also on my website. It's called the Free Leadership Styles Quiz. And like, say, for example, if you're an Enneagram 1, you might find trusting and letting go a little bit harder, because the 1 typically is a bit of a perfectionist, loves detail, likes to feel really in control, and likes to know everything that's going on. The 8 can sometimes be the same. Whereas like if you're a 9 or a 7, you may find this whole trust piece easier. So there's also like, and the 9 is like the peacemaker. The 7 is like the happy-go-lucky kind of like freedom, enjoy life and be happy personality type. So go and take the quiz if you don't know what your type is. And that might also help you understand how this theory can actually apply to your own individual personality style and your leadership style. So I'll drop that link in the show notes below. But anyway, I hope that you enjoyed this episode. As always, I love to hear your feedback, and I can't wait to connect with you so soon in the future. Sending so much love. Thank you so much for listening. If you got value from this episode, I've got a little request for you. Either share it with a fellow leader who you know needs this in their life, or leave a super quick review. It only takes a few seconds, yet it helps us so much in expanding our reach and our impact and bringing on even bigger names onto the potty to then inspire your growth and your journey. I love and appreciate you so much. Thank you in advance, and I can't wait to see you next time.